2014. Welcome to the John Moore Show. Excellent article at Dave Hodge's website, The Common Sense Show. The title of the article is The Grand Chessboard of World War III. Quick note, today at 4 p.m. Central Time, I'll be a guest with Dr. Bill Deagle on Genesis Communications. It's always fun to be with Dr. Bill. We do have patiently waiting in the green room my friend Bob Gaskin. Bob is a former Marine. He is a preparedness consultant and educator, and the author of the book, Society Ending Events, The First 180 Days. Bob, good morning, sir.
Morning, John. How are you today?
Well, getting used to the time change here. Bob, we've got a lot to talk about and about 37 minutes to do it. So it's story. So just jump in there from where you want to begin, sir.
Okay, which part do you want to talk about?
Well, you and I talked privately about your meeting in Kansas City, and I'm not sure how much of that you want to go into. That's very interesting to me. I know our listeners would like to hear about it.
Right. Okay, well, we can start there, but to tell that story, we got to kind of go back about a year. So,
okay.
Can I take like 6 minutes and give a quick rundown?
Absolutely. Let's lay some foundation here.
Outstanding. I travel all over the country doing seminars, workshops. I talk at prepper expos. I've written a couple books. Society and Events, The First 180 Days was the first one, and that kind of set the stage for a lot of the talks that I give. I've got my own radio show, write articles for Prepared Magazine, all that kind of good stuff. But for about the past year or two, I've been actively forecasting events that take place months into the future. And my track record is 100% at this point. If you go back and look at some YouTube videos of me back from January and February, I accurately forecasted in January earthquakes and different events that would take place in February. In February, I actively forecasted the island forming off of the coast of Pakistan and India, specific forecast of the magnitude of earthquake on the date that it would take place. Talked about in February, there's videos of me talking about all of the earthquakes that took place in October and November. In June, there was quite a few videos of me talking about different things that took place in November and December. In October of 2012, was it 2012? No, I'm sorry. In October of 2011, I accurately forecasted Hurricane Sandy and the winter storm that followed. So my track record to date has been 100%, and all of this has time date stamps on it. So I don't talk about opinion. I don't allow religion or opinion to interject into anything that I talk about. I only speak about the facts as they're laid out. About 3 years ago, I gave a talk. I said that a financial collapse was a physical impossibility in the United States of America. And the reason being is because there's 13 specific items that have to take place, 13 specific events that have to take place in a specific order with specific time frames in between each event. And the odds of that happening are in the hundreds of trillions. Okay, it's so astronomical that it's hard to even fathom something like that happening. The reason I've been able to accurately forecast all of these events, both man-made and natural events that have taken place over the last 2 years, is because I have a lot of very good insight coming from very high-placed sources that share this information with me. With the natural disasters, we've been forecasting these things since 1984. Really came into swing about 1986. It's taken historical data, scientific data, astrological data, geological data, plugging them all into mathematical equations, and being able to forecast the percentage of probability of natural events taking place. A lot of the information that I've been getting from a friend of mine that I was in the Marine Corps with back 89 to 90, he and I served together 80 to 93. We were reintroduced to each other at one of the International Disaster Conference and Expos down in New Orleans, and he turned me on to a lot of this data. A couple of weeks ago, he quit his job. Very high-placed government job, quit his job. He's moving his entire family to Texas and I sat down and first started talking about this information, he provided me with a lot of paperwork, a lot of emails, a lot of reports. None of it's classified. None of it is secret. Nothing that I legally can't have.
Right.
Okay. In it was quite a few things leading up to and showing that the government is actively preparing for an economic downturn, for lack of a better terminology. I don't like to use the term economic collapse, but an economic downturn on April the 11th. When you look into the research of all of this, there are key things that have taken place over the last 6 to 8 months, 9 months, that point toward this and set the stage. It's not something that was intentional, and it is something that could be prevented, but there's less than a 20% chance that it could be prevented. So there's the history. If you want me to go into all of the math behind that and the data behind that.
I think we laid enough foundation there, Bob, to go ahead and move on. Yes.
Okay, good. So there's several things that have been taking place that the average American isn't aware of. For example, starting in June of last year, the Federal Reserve is the only entity in the world that is buying our debt. And they're purchasing about $84 billion a month. In October, we had a government shutdown. The government shutdown had nothing to do with Obamacare. It had nothing to do with, Republicans.
Hold that thought, Bob. We have a break. Call numbers 800-313-9443. We'll be back after the break. All right, we're back. Ladies and gentlemen, this is J.R. Moore. It is Monday, the 10th day of March. We're visiting with Mr. Bob Gaskin. Bob, do you have a website that you'd like to put out here?
We don't really keep up with our website a lot. I'm not a web designer, but it's blackdogsurvivalschool.com. To keep up with our updates, we put a lot of them on Facebook, the Black Dog Survival School Facebook page.
Okay.
The best way to keep up with what's going on with what we've got going on.
All right, real good. Well, before the break, you were talking about an economic event the second week of April. Let's just jump right back in there.
Okay, so a lot of people are misled over what the government shutdown completely entailed in October. It wasn't about any of the hype that we saw in the news. Basically, what it boiled down to was that the government of the United States was out of money. The agreement that we'd made with the Federal Reserve in June for them to buy 3 months' worth of debt had expired. In October, we made an agreement with the Federal Reserve that we would allow them to raise the interest rates 0.3% a month for November, December, and January. We did not do that. As a result, little history. Federal Reserve is owned by the International Bank of Disputes in Basel, Switzerland. They all own 13 other central banks, including Russia and Japan. The International Bank of Disputes in Basel, Switzerland are the ones that write the Basel Accords, Basel I, Basel II, and Basel III. By us not raising the interest rates in November, December, and January of this year, we came into violation with our agreement, Federal Reserve, whereby they agreed to loan us money to keep us in operation for 6 months. Because of that, we are in violation of the Basel II Accords, which the International Banking Law. Bank of Disputes is going to a $29 billion or 11 days working capital on hand, meaning that by the 11th of April, if the United States government pull out all stops and take some kind of drastic measure, they're not going to be able to sell any of their debt. And if they can't sell their debt, they go broke on April 11th. Specifically, sometime around 2:20 in the afternoon Eastern time, they go broke on April 11th.
Okay.
So the things to watch for is, we all know that the stock markets have been, kind of fictitiously propped up. A huge indicator that it's imminent, it would be when the stock market drops 5 business day period, the stock market drops at some points. No matter where it starts, no matter where it ends, it could end on the fifth day at just 20 points where it started on day one, but at some point there it dropped at least 1,000 points. If that happens, you can expect the following week to have a half-day bank holiday, to which they'll come out with something on the news about, there's some kind of big counterfeiting deal going on, and they've got to exchange all the currency and release the new 20s, 50s, and 100s into the market. That will actually be the precursor to a currency swap. Now, a lot of people think this can't happen, and for years I thought it couldn't happen with all the research that I was doing on it. But everything has taken place. All 13 indicators took place in 2013 in the exact order that they needed to take place, what the exact time frames in. Now, what confirmed all of this for me, and I'm sure you're wanting me to share with your listeners, is this. The weekend before, I was in Overland Park, Kansas, at a gun show. I've never done that gun show before, ever. Okay, I've done Kansas, but I've never done Overland Park.
Right.
On Friday morning, my wife threw a post on Facebook to come see us at the Overland Park gun show, because we do have some followers in the Kansas area, not many, about a dozen or so. With that being said, that was the only indication that we were going to be there. My buddy that I was in the Corps with, that's worked with the government, contacted me Friday afternoon and said, hey, where are you staying at tonight? Let's have breakfast in the morning. We met at my hotel room, or my hotel at the restaurant down there. We had breakfast on Saturday morning, and he provided me with a whole bunch of documents that I didn't sell anything Saturday at the gun show. I was too absorbed with reading all of these documents. I left the gun show at 5 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. As I was pulling out of the parking lot, I called my wife and I said, honey, you got to find me a Hampton Inn or a Hilton hotel close to the show. I don't want to drive 20 minutes like I did this morning. She found me a Hampton Inn that was 1.9 miles from where this was. While I was talking to her, I was sitting at a stoplight. It was literally less than 2 miles from my hotel. She put me on hold. She went online. She booked my room, came back, gave me the confirmation number of the hotel I was staying at, which was the Hampton Inn in Overland Park, Kansas. I pulled out of the stoplight, pulled out of the parking lot, turned right at the stoplight, drove 1.9 miles to my hotel, and when I pulled into my hotel, there were two gentlemen waiting in the lobby. They didn't say anything to me that night.
You made eye contact with these men.
Yes, we had eye contact. They wanted me to know that they were there.
Right.
Okay. I went outside several times a night. I'm a smoker. I was in a non-smoking hotel. Every time I'd go downstairs to go outside, they were there. The next morning at breakfast, I got done eating my breakfast. I was paying attention to them the whole time I was there eating my breakfast. Every time I looked up, at least one of them was looking at me. I got up, went and got a cup of coffee, threw my plate away, got a cup of coffee, and as I was filling my cup of coffee to leave, one of the gentlemen leaned over toward me because he'd got up and came over to the coffee pot as well. And he said, Mr. Gaskin, if you have a few moments, we'd like to speak with you, and we don't want to make a scene. Now, I'm in Overland Park, Kansas.
Right.
Okay? Nobody knows me there other than 12 to 15 people that follow us on Facebook. I'd never met these people before in my life, knew my name. And that began probably the scariest hour and a half of my life. They wanted some documents back that I'd been given the day before I gave them to them. There was no legal reason why I couldn't have those documents. There was no confidentiality on them, nothing stamped classified or top secret or anything like that. But they wanted their documents back, and I gave it to them. Now, to me, the steps that they went through to get those documents back confirmed for me what I had read in those documents.
Let me tell you real quick how federal...
I'm sorry?
Let me give you an education real quick, a quick education, Bob, on how a federal surveillance works if you're an important enough target. They'll have at least two vehicles on the ground, right. And they'll have an aircraft. It doesn't matter, probably fixed one because it causes less attention, doing lazy circles above you. The person in the aircraft will have access to monitoring your cell phone in real time.
Right.
And they don't follow you on the ground where you can see them. The aircraft keeps tracking while you're mobile, and then when you're destinated, then they advise the people on the ground where you are so they can move in and put an eyeball on you. That's how federal surveillance works if you're an important enough target.
Right. Now, I can't confirm anything about air assets, but I do know that, and one of the things that kind of set me on edge before I got up to get my coffee was where I was sitting at, I could see my truck in the front parking lot. And there was a black Suburban pulled in behind my truck, keeping my truck from being able to be pulled out of the parking spot. The interesting thing about all of this to me was surveillance, you don't see the people that are surveilling you. The average person doesn't think that they're being followed, that they have no reason to think they're being followed. Right. So it works to everybody's advantage, and they don't let you know that you're being followed. These, though, were making eye contact with me the second I walked in the hotel. And I walked in the hotel, John, this is the thing that freaked me out the most. I walked in that hotel less than 5 minutes after my wife had booked my room. 5 minutes before I walked in that hotel, I didn't know I was staying at that hotel.
Well, they were monitoring your cell phone in real time.
Exactly. So, there were no threats made. By the way, I cannot I cannot confirm whether they were federal or not. I'll just leave it at that.
We have a break. Well, we'll get back to this story after the break. Everybody stay tuned. All right, we're back, ladies and gentlemen. This is J.R. Moore. It is Monday, the 10th day of March. Freeze Dry Guy offers a wide selection of ready-to-eat freeze-dried food, individually packaged, freeze-dried entrees, meats, vegetables, fruits. Tasty freeze-dried meals include a selection of meat choices including beef, chicken, and pork, vegetarian, gluten-free, low-sodium beef, chicken, and pork. They've helped families with food security and emergency preparedness for 42 years. Let them help you today to build food security for your family. Check out the details at freezedryguy.com. There's a link to my website, thelibertyman.com. I'll be having Freeze Dry Guy interviewing him in the not-too-distant future here on the air for the first time in several years. Toll-free order line, Pacific Business Hours, 866-404-3663. This morning we're visiting with Megan, the author of the book, Society Ending Events, The First 180 Days. Bob, physically, your physique reminds me of an NFL linebacker. You're a pretty big guy physically, and I would think that these agents would have been just slightly intimidated by you, wouldn't they?
Well, I would hope to think that, but yeah, I'm not really that big.
Well, you give that impression, and trust me, they were. 'Cause these guys want to wrap up their shift and go home at the end of the day with no arm. Tell us about walking past the registration desk and what you said to the young woman behind the desk.
Well, I had to go up to my room with one of them to get the stuff that they wanted. And as we walked by the front desk, of course there was a debate beforehand. They both wanted to go up with me. I was unwilling to do that. It was the whole good cop, bad cop thing. And I was willing to go up there with the good cop and not the bad cop. So as I'm walking by the front desk of the hotel, I turned to the lady and I said, "Ms. Bob Gaskin, I'm in room such and such. This gentleman is with such and such agency. If you don't see me in 10 minutes, I need you to contact the local authorities and my wife." And to which she kind of looked at me kind of incredulously, and she said, "What?" And I said, "Yes, my name is Bob Gaskin. I'm in room such and such. If you don't see me in 10 minutes, contact the local authorities." And it was kind of funny because when the gentleman looked at me and he says, "Well played." I said, "Thank you. You just never know, But it was very tense time for me. The thing that shook me to the boots the most is that for about a year and a half now, I've been telling people that there's a greater than 80% potential for some type of economic event in April. And a greater than 80% potential for near-Earth objects starting in August and running for about 36 months, but the worst of which would run through about the middle of October of this year. And all of the documents I was given pertain to those two topics. Specifically, one report I read, like I've said on the radio shows and on my own radio show, I won't mention when it's coming or where it's going to hit, but I will say that the from about the 10th of September through the 20th of September, I will not take a Caribbean cruise. So,
right.
But the September event is the one that's got me really shook up because there were pretty detailed reports. It had to do with Mission Juno and our space program.
That doesn't sound like it's real mission to me.
Exactly. Now, from that, though, and the other thing that kind of really shook me in the boots was some events that took place afterwards, which I'll tell you in just a second. But the thing that shook me about the reports is it's talking about an object in space. It's coming from the other side of Jupiter. There's about 7 weeks a year for the last 4 years that we're able to see it with our telescopes and with our satellites orbiting around the Earth. So that was the purpose of this Mission Juno. We actually detected it back in 2006, and it was a fluke that we detected it. So the thing that shook me about it the most was after reading that report, obviously I was shook up, and then with meeting these gentlemen the next morning, I was very shook up. But then on Tuesday of that week, they were talking about on Fox how NASA had discovered over 1,700 planets, new planets that they didn't know existed, yada, yada, yada. And then on Thursday, they come out and say that of these 1,700-plus planets, 163 of them have been determined to be human habitable. Then they come out about 5 hours after that on Fox News again, talking about how NASA has now confirmed, and keep in mind, I'm an alien guy. I've never met an alien. I cannot confirm nor deny that they exist. But for Fox to come out and say that NASA released a statement stating that we are the only intelligent life form in the known space, then they come out on Saturday, and this is where it really shook me. They've detected 3 asteroids. Now, the reports I read only talked about one, but they detected 3 asteroids, one of which had actually been caught on video as breaking up, coming from the direction of Jupiter. So all of these things together with the report I read that Saturday and all of the information and all of the events that took place just kind of has me really shook to the core. You know, I mean, I'm very concerned about it. My personal plans are come April, about the 8th or 9th of April, all of my bank accounts, any of them that have more than $500 in it, I'm going to pull all my money out of those accounts. By April, I will not any tied up in the stock market. It'll now come the 16th, 17th of April, if everything's still normal, because there is still a 15 to 20% chance they can head this off.
Right.
Come the 15th, 16th of April, if everything is still normal, then I'll put my money back in the bank. But as a cautionary measure, I'm going to take it out. Now, the thing that really interests me about that is I've spoken to a lot of my friends in different state National Guards, different state police forces, things like that, in the new FEMA and these regions, the October 1st, which are the primary 14 inland states. They are actively preparing the 11th of April. Now, if you look at the timeline, the loans stop coming from the Federal Reserve on March 31st. The clock starts ticking. We have roughly 11 days of cash reserves on hand. That puts us at April 11th. Then we run out of money. And at that point in time, things are going to kind of go haywire. So if they don't do anything to curtail this, and it would take drastic measures. I mean, when you look at some of the statements coming out of 7 weeks ago, statements coming out of the International Bank of Disputes out of Basel, Switzerland, that, the Federal Reserve is not authorized to loan the United States government any more money. And then the following week, we have 7, in 5 days, we have 7 high-placed, senior-level, executive-level financial guys, commit suicide. Total of 22 in 4 weeks. That's just crazy. So you start putting all these pieces of the puzzle together. I'm fond of saying that the average prepper finds one thing that they want to be concerned about, and that's the only thing that they focus on. And it becomes all-consuming, and they miss out of life, and they miss out of all the joy and everything going on around them because they're so worried about this one thing that has them afraid.
Right.
The problem is while they're focusing on that one detail, there's so many other things coming at them that they're not paying attention to. And in this situation, when you say, I'm expecting an economic downturn here in a few weeks, okay, actually about 4 weeks, I guess, 5 weeks maybe. Right. When you make a statement like that, a lot of people sit back and go, yeah, well, I've heard that before. But when you look at the full picture, the Federal Reserve is no longer allowed to loan us any money. And they're the only entity since June that's been loaning us money. Then you take into effect that China has dumped 37% of their U.S. held debt, 17% of which they sold to North Korea. I mean, North Korea. You follow me? 43% of their debt was sold to Japan. In the last 4 weeks, Russia's liquidated over 60% of their U.S. held debt. Well, obviously, we see what's going on there. Then you take into account that right now the movements of those two nations. China's sending something like 1,700 surface-to-air missile batteries over to the area of Guam, and then the United States government repositioning 3,000 Marines from Okinawa over to Guam. You look at what's going on in Ukraine right now, and you take all of that into account and sit back and look at it all, and you go, you know what? The big picture is not looking very good for April 11th.
Bob, we have people like Gerald Celente, who's become pretty mainstream. He's on Fox News and so forth a lot, pointing to the second quarter of this year as being a time of great concern. So you're attaching a specific time frame to this is really not all that adverse to what some pretty mainstream economic prognosticators are saying, is it?
Right, exactly.
Break here. The call number is 800-313-9443, and we'll be right back. All right, we're back, ladies and gentlemen. This is J.R. Moore. It is Monday, the 10th day of March. My website is thelibertyman.com. Thelibertyman.com. You'll find interesting free downloads there, such as The Art of War by General Sun Tzu, a book older than the Bible. Other interesting things, check it out at thelibertyman.com. Also, the energy cleaner for sale, $285 shipping included to American zip codes. Toll-free auto line, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, is 800-592-9543. I say again, 800-592-9543. We're visiting with Mr. Bob Gaskin. If you go to his YouTube page, Black Dog Survival, I think you'll find a lot of interesting information there. Bob, this economic event is basically 5 weeks away from today. April the 11th is a month away from March the 11th, which is tomorrow. So in these next 5 weeks, people can make some last-minute preparations, can't they?
They sure can. They sure can, and I would highly advise that. You know, again, there's only about an 80 to an 85% chance that this event will actually take place. But when you look at 2008, you know, one of the last acts that he did as president, President Bush authorized the bank bailouts, the big whole deal in 2008. And the issue with that most people don't realize, and I talk to people all the time, you know, I talk to preppers at expos and at gun shows, you name it. And I hear the same thing all of the time. And what I hear is them complaining about those bank bailouts. But here's what the average person doesn't understand. We were less than 90 minutes away from the Chinese markets opening when when President Bush finally made that decision and authorized bank bailouts. Less than 90 minutes. Had he not made that decision, when the Chinese markets opened, the U.S. dollar would have crumbled. Now, here's the interesting thing, and the reason why I tell that story. This is the fourth time since 2008 that we've come to this crossroads. In 2008, there was a 50-50 chance that we would have a serious economic downturn if we didn't act. Now there's an 80 to 85% chance that we're going to have a serious economic downturn if the federal government doesn't do something drastic. So while there is still the opportunity for them to do something to prevent this, it doesn't look likely. It just doesn't. So, you know, my wife and I, there's a lot of things that we became privy to back September, October of last year. And we made the decision, probably December, that we were pulling out all the stops. We're responsible for about 43, 44 people should our country face a society-ending event.
Right.
And we wanted to make sure we had everything, you know, that those people would need: food, water, fire shelter, first aid, hygiene, toilet paper, toothbrush, everything you could think of.
Right.
For a minimum of 3 years. Now, the reason we chose 3 years, the FEMA, when they first came out and started talking about preparedness, they said that you needed 7 days worth of everything that your family would need. Then it became 30 days, and then 60 days, and then 6 weeks, and then 6 months. The newest releases as of January of this year is FEMA is actually telling people that they need 2 to 4 years of everything that they need on hand should we face a national catastrophe. 2 to 4 years.
That's
of
huge.
Disruption to our distribution services.
That's huge. Bob, right. Within a few days following the country being bankrupt, the electronic, the EBT cards people used to purchase food and what used to be food stamps, they will stop working, won't they?
Right.
And what would the consequences of that be?
Well, we actually saw a test run of that, and I'm not talking about what happened just a few months ago. I'm talking about October of last year in Atlanta, Georgia. The EBT cards were delayed 48 hours from being loaded. And what we saw was the Social Security offices and the Department of Human Services offices all over the city, you know, between 100 and 200 people gathering out there. It was all over the news in Atlanta. I believe it made national news once or twice. You know, people screaming, "How am I going to feed my kids? You know, you got to load my EBT. You know, you got to give me my money." All that kind of good stuff. So we know that we will immediately start to see some type of breakdown in society. And when I say immediate, you know, a lot of people think they'll have a 3 to 5 day window, but in reality, they don't. They'll have about a 24-hour window. When you get up in the morning and you check your online banking account, and it tells you that the website is down for servicing, and then you leave your house and you're driving to work, and you see people standing outside the banks waiting to get in because the ATMs aren't working. That's when you've got less than 24 hours.
Turn around. It's time to go do something more important. We got a caller here, Bob. We've got James from Oklahoma. Good morning, James.
Good morning. My question is that there was a prophet from Puerto Rico, and, he contacted NASA, and NASA found this meteor that's coming in, and they've tried to, they've launched nukes from submarines, they've with other devices, and it didn't even make a dent in it. And this is a judgment from God. And he said there would be 200 million people on the East Coast in the Gulf that probably will die from the tsunami.
Okay. Well, thank you for the call, James. We appreciate it. Well, Bob, obviously he's talking about a celestial event, which may or may not be the one that we're concerned about in September. These celestial events could certainly change the everything, couldn't they?
They could, and here's the interesting thing about that. A lot of people ask me, Bob, how can I confirm this? How can I confirm this? It's very simple. If you look at the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, also known as HR 1960 from 2011, everybody's focused on Section 1021, which supposedly talks about indefinite detention. Which it does, but it doesn't, okay? More importantly, what a lot of people don't realize, because they only Google that one section, they only read that one section. Again, they focus on the one thing that brings about fear, right?
Right.
If they would just take the time to read the entire document, Section 1023 and 1026 are the two scariest sections of that document. Absolutely terrifying, okay? One section talks about the prohibition of being able to detain foreign nationals on U.S. soil in specific locations. Specifically, it mentions military bases, because what is the NDAA? It's the National Defense Authorization Act, or more importantly, it's DOD's budget.
Right.
But when you look at 1028, that's where, 1026, that's where it really gets you, because it talks about a line of there that you just, it doesn't make sense that would fall in the military's purview, right? Because it deals with NASA.
Right.
So then you go down in the last, page 1440-something, and find that line item in the budget. Here's Pacific Joint Multinational Space Program. Now, we have pretty much skeletonized NASA. We no longer have a space program.
Right.
Yet again, in 2011, when we can't agree on a budget, when we can't agree on funding, when our country's going broke, we authorize all this money for a joint international space program. And then you look at that, and it really kind of starts to spark the interest. The interesting thing about this is they're paying attention to news about how Putin and the folks in China and the United States, and we're all up in arms about everything. But what it really boils down to is that in 2011, we authorized this money to go to a joint international space program to actually base shuttle in space at the International Space Station. The International Space Station that the United States funded over 80% of, that doesn't have a single American on board right now. Why would they be building this if not for some kind of major mission? And the interesting thing about all of this is this entire thing is like it's something made for TV, right?
Right.
But it's what's going on. And I'm very fond of telling people when they show us something or tell us on TV that could possibly happen, you can bet your bottom dollar it's already happened, and that's their softball.
Absolutely. We've got less than a minute here to wrap up your thoughts, Bob.
Just my thoughts are, if you're not prepared, get prepared. You've been warned. You've been warned. Final warning, folks. If you love your family, get prepared. You no longer have the luxury of buying another TV. You need to have food, water, fire, shelter, first aid, and hygiene.
Bob, thank you, sir, for talking privately today.
All right, brother, thanks.
Okay.